Flames rose from the middle of the backyard, glowing red, like a wound slashed across the gray sky. In that fire, Eleanor saw her son's face melting on a photograph, Daniel's smile slowly turning to ash. Her widowed daughter-in-law, Melissa, stood beside the blaze, the light casting a calm, almost chilling glow on her face. "These old things only make people hurt more," she said, her voice soft as wind but sharper than any knife. Eleanor didn't reply. She stepped closer, the wind carrying the scent of smoke and memories. Amid the half-burned photos, she saw something metallic, glinting not ash, but a secret. A small piece of foil, neatly folded, shimmered beneath the cinders. She used her glove to nudge it out of the fire, and the cold touch of metal against her skin made her heart pound. 3 years ago, Daniel had died in this very house. They said it was an accident, a slippery stair, a fall, a blow to the head. Melissa had screamed beside her husband's body, her blood-stained hands trembling as she held his shirt. Eleanor had believed her. The whole town had. Who could have imagined that 3 years later, the same widow would calmly burn every memory of that marriage, as if erasing a stain? "Why are you doing this?" Eleanor asked, her voice hoarse. Melissa didn't look at her, only said quietly, "I need a new beginning, Mother." Daniel is gone. Those 2 words, "is gone," fell like a hammer, and Eleanor understood that what lay between them now was colder than ash. When the fire died, Melissa turned back toward the house, leaving Eleanor standing alone in the evening wind. She bent down, unfolding the piece of foil with trembling fingers. Inside was not a photo, not a letter, but a scorched USB drive, its metal core still intact. She couldn't tell if she was shaking from the cold or from what might be revealed. That night, the small house by Lake Vermont was silent. Wind from the water carried the sound of dry branches tapping against the window. Eleanor placed the charred USB on the table beside a cup of cinnamon tea, gone cold. Memories flooded back. The day Daniel died, she had run to the hospital through pouring rain. Melissa sat in the waiting room, face buried in her hands, tears mingling with bloodstains on her shirt. When the doctor came out, Eleanor knew just by looking into his eyes. Her son, the one who once said, "Mom, I'll always live near you," was gone. The house lost its laughter. Mornings no longer echoed with the sound of Daniel's cheerful calls as he took his little girl to school. Melissa withdrew into silence, then slowly vanished from Eleanor's life. Only her granddaughter, little Sophie, remained a source of comfort. Once a month, Melissa would bring the child to visit, short and distant, as if fulfilling an obligation. Then this autumn, no one came at all. Just a hollow phone call. "I'm busy, don't wait for us." From that day on, the house by the lake held only the ticking of the clock and the wind sweeping across the porch. Tonight, under the yellow lamp, Eleanor stared at the half-burned USB. She almost threw it away, but a feeling deep in her heart said no. She remembered Daniel's eyes in the wedding photo. Eyes that seemed to say, "Mom, never believe everything you see." She went to Nora, the elderly neighbor who used to be a computer technician. When the screen lit up, the data appeared folders with strange names, private memories, H+M. Nora frowned. "Looks like videos, Eleanor, but the creation date's strange, 3 weeks before Daniel died." A single click. On the screen appeared Melissa, smiling in a familiar cafe where Daniel had once taken Eleanor for coffee on their first visit together. But the man sitting across from her wasn't Daniel. He was someone else, brown-haired, wearing a suit, his arm draped around her shoulder. He kissed her cheek as laughter filled the background. In the corner of the screen, the date blinked. Eleanor felt her heart tighten each beat like a hand squeezing it. Nora gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you sure you want to keep watching?" she asked softly. Eleanor nodded. She needed to know. She had to know. In the next video, Melissa looked straight into the camera, her voice low but each word distinct. "Once this is done, everything will belong to us. He doesn't suspect a thing." Eleanor shot to her feet, the chair crashing to the wooden floor. A chill ran down her spine. The air in the room grew heavy, almost solid. She turned away, swallowing her tears. The image of her son, kind, devoted, dead, at the hands of the woman he had trusted most, tore her heart apart. But beneath the pain was something else, a spark faint but alive like fire rekindled in darkness. She was no longer the fragile mother waiting for pity. She was Eleanor Brooks, once the head of a school, a woman who understood the law and the only person who could bring the truth back to light. She lifted her head, looking through the window where ashes still clung to the grass. "My son," she whispered, "they think I'm old, that I've faded away. But I'm still here, and I will find the truth." Outside, the wind swelled across the lake. In the silver light of the moon, a new fire had been lit in the heart of a mother who had lost her child, the fire of justice. Rain had started falling before dawn, the heavy drops beating against the window like the knocking of old memories. Eleanor sat by the window, hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee, eyes fixed on the misty edge of the lake. She hadn't slept. The images from the USB kept replaying in her mind, Melissa's tilted face under the cafe light, that sweet smile edged with malice, and the chilling words, "He doesn't suspect a thing." Each syllable pierced her heart. She had once believed Melissa was just a young widow in grief, a woman who needed time to heal. But now the pieces were falling into place, forming a picture too dreadful to ignore. 3 years ago, Daniel's death had been called an accident. The police said he slipped on the stairs and hit his head. But Eleanor had been the first to enter the house after the call. She still remembered the metallic scent in the air, the smell of dried blood. Daniel's staircase was straight, its railing solid, the steps never slippery. She had suspected something, but Melissa had cried until she fainted, begging her not to reopen the wound. The police closed the case quickly. The hospital confirmed a head injury, and the file was sealed. Looking back now, it all seemed too perfect, perfect enough to be false. Eleanor closed her eyes, her breathing heavy. The bedroom door creaked open and a small voice said, "Grandma, you're awake." Sophie, her little granddaughter with dark blonde hair and brown eyes just like Daniel's, stood in the doorway clutching a teddy bear. Eleanor quickly wiped her tears and smiled. "Come here, my little angel." The girl climbed onto the chair and nestled into her grandmother's arms. "Mom said I'll stay with you all day. She's busy with work." Eleanor nodded. At least Melissa still sent the child over, meaning the connection hadn't been severed completely. She kissed Sophie's forehead, the scent of baby soap softening her heart, though unease still lingered. What was Melissa hiding? Why bring Sophie here suddenly? Right after the USB had been found, while Sophie ate breakfast, Eleanor quietly opened the drawer and took out an old envelope containing Daniel's death report. She read every line again for the first time in years. Time of death, 3:15 p.m., September 10th. No witnesses. Cause of death, fall from stairs. She remembered that afternoon vividly. It had been pouring. She was in the kitchen baking apple pie when the phone rang. Melissa's voice had screamed through the line, "Mom, he fell. He's not waking up." Eleanor had raced out like someone possessed. When she arrived, the ambulance was already in front of the house. That scene had haunted her for life. Daniel's limp hand, half-open eyes, his face still wet with tears. No one ever explained why he was home at that hour when he usually worked until evening. No one noticed the bruises on his ankle as if someone had pulled him hard. Only one person saw it, Eleanor. But when she mentioned it, everyone said it was just the delusion of a grieving mother. Now she knew it hadn't been a delusion. She put the paper back and stood up. In the mirror, the reflection staring back was that of an old woman with silver hair, but her eyes shone with new fire. "Daniel," she whispered, "I've been silent for too long." At noon, Melissa came to pick up Sophie. She wore a white blouse, her hair tied back, looking as busy and ordinary as ever. But when their eyes met, Eleanor saw a flicker of caution. "Was Sophie good?" Melissa asked. "She was wonderful." Eleanor replied slowly, her gaze fixed on her daughter-in-law. "She even drew me a picture." "She loves to draw." Melissa smiled a little stiffly. "Please make sure she doesn't play with the ink." She bent to tie Sophie's shoes, then said softly, "Mom, I know you've been sad lately. I just hope you won't dwell on the past. Daniel wouldn't want that." Eleanor fought to keep her voice steady. The words sounded kind, but beneath them was a warning. Melissa knew something. She was testing to see how much Eleanor had discovered. The old woman simply smiled. "I just miss my son, dear. Don't worry." When Melissa's car rolled out of the driveway, Eleanor stood on the porch, watching it disappear. The afternoon sun slanted through the trees, lighting the wooden sign she and Robert had carved years ago, Brooks Family Home since 2010. Now only she remained like a gatekeeper, guarding a fading memory. The phone rang inside. She answered. "Eleanor, this is Ian Hale. Do you remember me?" The deep, steady voice of the detective who had handled Daniel's case made her freeze for a moment. "I remember." "What is it, Detective? I've just been reassigned to the town. I can't stop thinking about your son's case. There were details I never forgot." Eleanor held her breath. "What do you mean?" The autopsy report mentioned a mark on Daniel's right wrist. They said it was a scrape from the fall, but to me it looked more like someone had grabbed him. I had no proof, but my gut told me it wasn't an accident. She sank into the chair, her heart pounding. After 3 years, someone finally saw what she had seen. "Detective Hale," she said quietly, "if I told you I found something that could change everything, would you believe me?" The line was silent for a few seconds. Then his voice came low and firm. "Meet me tonight at the old dock. Tell no one." Eleanor hung up and stood still. Outside, twilight spread over the lake, turning the water a deep crimson. 3 years after her son's death, for the first time, she realized that red glow didn't come from the setting sun, but from the justice about to rise. That evening, the sunset blazed red like blood. The old dock on the shore of Lake St. Clair was deserted. The only sounds were the rhythmic slap of water against the rotting planks and the creak of the mooring rope swaying in the wind. Eleanor arrived earlier than planned, a wool scarf wrapped around her neck, the USB drive tucked safely inside a velvet pouch in her coat pocket. Every step she took on the damp wooden floor reminded her of Daniel, of those days when mother and son rode together into the middle of the lake, laughing as the wind splashed water onto their faces. Now that laughter was just an echo drifting through the fog. A sound behind her made her flinch. Ian Hale stepped out from the shadows, tall, wearing a dark leather coat, his eyes carrying the weary calm of a man who had seen too much of the world's sins. "You still have it?" he asked quietly, nodding toward her pocket. Eleanor nodded. "I need you to see this." She handed him the USB, her hand trembling slightly. Ian took a laptop from his briefcase, opened it, and the bluish light of the screen flickered in the darkness. He plugged the device in the tiny indicator. Light blinked. The hum of the machine mixed with the sound of the waves thickening the air with tension. The image appeared. Melissa standing in a brightly lit kitchen, her hair neatly tied, her smile radiant. Across from her sat a man Eleanor had never seen before, Harrison Cole. His eyes were full of arrogance, a glass of wine in his hand, his voice faint but clear enough to make out, "As long as everything goes as planned, the insurance payout will be yours." Melissa smiled, her fingers sliding along the rim of the glass, the light catching her eyes, cold as glass. Ian straightened his face, turning pale. My God, this is evidence. Eleanor gripped the arm of her chair. You see it now, they planned it before Daniel died. Do you know who this man is? He asked. Not yet, but I can guess. He's the reason my son is dead, and the reason my daughter-in-law became rich just 3 months later. Ian took notes, his gaze never leaving the screen. I'll look into Harrison Cole. If you're right, he'll have left a trail. A cold gust swept through, carrying the briny smell of the lake. Eleanor stared down at the black surface of the water. For 3 years, I've lived with one question: why? Now I just want the truth, no matter how cruel it is. Are you ready for the consequences? Ian asked in a low voice. If we reopen the case, Melissa will know someone is digging into the past. You could become a target. She already took my only child. I have nothing left to lose. There was a long silence. Then Ian nodded. I'll start with the finances. The insurance policy that transfers new assets under her name. If she received the payout too quickly, it means someone inside the system helped cover it up. Eleanor's grip tightened. I won't sit still. Tell me what I can do. Stay calm. Act as if you haven't discovered anything. And if you can stay close to your granddaughter. The child might have seen or heard something that day. Hearing Sophie's name made Eleanor's heart twist. The image of her golden-haired granddaughter smiling in the garden flashed across her mind like a fleeting ray of sunlight. She's only 4. I don't want her hurt any more than she already has been. Sometimes children remember what adults think they've forgotten, Ian said. We just need to ask in the right way. They left the dock when night had fully fallen. On the drive home, Eleanor looked through the car window, watching the town's lights fade in the distance. Inside, her fear mixed with something unexpected, a strange sense of relief. After 3 years haunted by silence, she was finally doing something. When she arrived home, she saw Melissa's car parked in front of the house. Her heart tightened. Melissa sat inside the glow of her phone, illuminating her face, calm and cold. She turned it off and stepped out. I came to see you, she said with a forced smile. There's something I want to talk about. Eleanor kept her tone steady. Come in. Melissa crossed the threshold, her heels clicking sharply on the wooden floor. I heard from the neighbors that someone came to see you tonight. Who was it? Eleanor smiled. An old friend. Why do you ask? Oh, nothing. Melissa said, her eyes sweeping the room. I just worry about you being alone. I know you've been dwelling on things lately. I don't want you to get obsessed. Eleanor looked straight at her. And what's wrong with obsession when someone's lost their loved one? Melissa paused, then smiled softly, her sweetness as hollow as ever. I just want you to stay healthy. Don't let the past keep hurting you. When she left, her car disappeared down the foggy road, and only then did Eleanor realize the look in her daughter-in-law's eyes hadn't been concern. It was suspicion. Melissa knew she was digging into the past. Later that night, Eleanor opened her laptop. Ian had sent a message, found Cole. He was once investigated for financial fraud. Now owns a construction company in Montpellier, has ties to the clinic where Melissa works. She read the message over and over, her chest burning with resolve. The window was slightly open, the wind carrying the scent of damp leaves. Eleanor closed her old notebook filled with notes about the case and looked into the mirror. In her reflection, she saw not only grief, but determination. They think I'm weak, she murmured. But they forget even ashes still hold embers. Outside Melissa's house, lights stayed on late into the night. Eleanor knew no one would sleep easy now. Not Melissa, not herself, and not those who thought their secrets could stay buried forever. The next morning, fog blanketed the surface of the lake like a thick gray shroud, so still that even the birds seemed afraid to sing. Eleanor brewed a fresh pot of tea, her hands trembling slightly. She hadn't slept all night. The image of Melissa sitting in the car outside the house lingered like a shadow, making her wonder if she had gone too far or if she was only just beginning. The doorbell rang. The knock was firm, not like a neighbor's or the mailman's. Eleanor opened the door. Standing there was Nora, her gray-haired neighbor, her face gaunt but her eyes sharp. "Nora, you're up early. I heard you needed help," Nora said quietly, glancing around before stepping inside. "Detective Hale sent me. He said you're keeping a copy of the USB data." Eleanor nodded, handing her a small external drive. "I was afraid of losing the evidence. He told me you'd help back it up." Nora sat at the table and opened her laptop. "I've done this my whole life. Don't worry." But Eleanor, listen. "I took a look at the first video and I think there's more." "What do you mean the H+M folder doesn't just contain videos? There are audio journals too, and one file named Promise, it's password protected." Eleanor held her breath. "Can you open it?" Nora nodded. "I'll try a few programs, but it might take a few hours." As Nora plugged in the drive, lines of code filled the glowing screen. While waiting, Eleanor looked around the room, everything painfully familiar. The armchair where Daniel used to read the paper. The blanket his mother had knitted the wedding photo, now half-burned with only a corner left intact. She traced her fingers over the cracked glass and whispered, "My son, help me." About 2 hours later, Nora lifted her head. "I've got it." Eleanor leaned closer. On the screen was an audio file. Nora pressed play. A woman's voice came through calm and steady Melissa's voice. September 8th. "Harrison said everything's ready. I just need to bring Daniel home early. He trusts me. He doesn't suspect a thing. Just one push and it's all over." The air in the room froze. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her body. Nora's hand trembled as she stopped the playback. "Eleanor, did you hear that she said one push?" It was her. Eleanor didn't answer. She sank into the chair, her mind spinning. 3 years of living in the dark, and now every word cut into her memory like a blade. After a long silence, she stood. "Nora, I need a copy of that file. Send one to Detective Hale right now. He told me to forward everything straight to the police department." Nora said quickly, typing fast. "But Eleanor, you must be careful. If Melissa finds out, we have proof I'm not afraid. Half of me died with Daniel." At noon, Eleanor went to pick up Sophie from preschool. The little girl came running out, her eyes bright as morning light. "Grandma." She threw herself into Eleanor's arms, her hair smelling of chalk and cookies. "Did you have fun, my angel?" "Yes, I drew a picture for you." She pulled a sheet of blue paper from her backpack. On it was a child's drawing, a house, a staircase, and 2 figures, one tall, one small, facing each other. At the edge of the stairs, the smaller figure was lying down, while the taller one reached out a hand. Eleanor froze. "Sophie, who did you draw, Daddy and Mommy?" the girl said innocently. "That day I saw Daddy fall." Mommy was standing near the stairs. I called her, but she didn't answer. The small voice sent chills down Eleanor's spine. The paper trembled in her hands. "Sophie, do you still remember that just a little?" the girl said, looking up. "Mommy said it was just a dream." Eleanor hugged her tight, hiding her tears. "It's all right, sweetheart. Grandma believes you." As the afternoon faded, she took Sophie home. When Melissa arrived to pick her up, her eyes landed on the drawing lying on the table. For a brief moment, Eleanor saw sheer panic flicker in her eyes. "This Sophie drew this at school." "Yes," Eleanor said evenly. "She said it's a memory." Melissa pressed her lips together, forcing a smile. "Kids have wild imaginations, Mother. Don't take it seriously." Eleanor nodded slowly, never looking away from her. Some imaginations are scarier than the truth, my dear. After they left, Eleanor immediately called Hale. He answered after a long pause. I have more evidence, she said quickly. An audio recording Melissa talks about a push, and my granddaughter, she remembers. Hale's voice grew low and urgent. My God, stay calm. I'll request to reopen the case. But listen to me. Eleanor, don't confront her. Don't reveal anything. They could come after you or the child. I understand, she whispered. But if she had the heart to push my son down those stairs, I won't let her push my granddaughter into the dark. When she hung up, she stood by the window, the night air pouring in, carrying the cold scent of the lake. In the glass reflection, her face looked aged, but her eyes were sharp as blades. The puzzle of lies was almost complete now. Melissa was no longer the grieving widow, but a calculated murderer. And in that silent house, Eleanor knew the game had begun, and she was no longer just a mourning mother. She was the one igniting the fire of truth. Rain poured relentlessly all morning, the heavy drops drumming against the old tiled roof, blending with the ticking of the clock into a sound as heavy as the heartbeat of someone hiding a secret. Eleanor sat at her desk, a pile of old case files before her, and a cup of cold tea untouched. Outside, the Vermont sky was a dull gray, matching the emptiness in her chest after listening again to the recording from the night before. The phone rang. It was Detective Ian Hale. Mrs. Eleanor, I filed the petition to reopen the case. He said, his voice steady. The prosecutor agreed to review it if we can present more physical evidence. Can you tell me again everything you remember from the day Daniel died? I need every detail, no matter how small. Eleanor closed her eyes, and the memories came crashing back like a wave of ice. That day, Daniel called me at noon. His voice sounded tired. He said he'd come home early to rest. That was the last time I ever heard my son's voice, she said hoarsely. When I arrived at his house that afternoon, the ambulance was already there. Melissa said he had tripped on the stairs, but I saw the steps were dry, no trace of water, and there was a red mark on Daniel's wrist, like someone had grabbed him. I told the police, but they said I was imagining things. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Hale spoke quietly. Do you remember where the body was positioned at the bottom of the stairs? His right arm was stretched out as if he was trying to reach for someone. I need to review the forensic photos. If you're right, Daniel might have fought back. After the call, Eleanor sat in silence for hours, her eyes fixed on the window where the rain streaked down like endless threads of memory. She knew the truth was beginning to surface, and once it rose completely, nothing could bury it again. Around noon, there was another knock at the door. It was Nora, soaked through her raincoat, holding a paper bag. Breaking news, she said, stepping in and shutting the door. Hale and I went over the bank records. There's a $750,000 transfer from the insurance company to Melissa just 3 weeks after Daniel's death. But here's the terrifying part. $200,000 of that was wired directly to a construction company owned by a man named Harrison Cole. Eleanor sprang to her feet. Cole? He's the man from the video, exactly. Hale confirmed it. They attended the same medical school. He was expelled for financial fraud, then opened his own firm. Eleanor gripped the edge of the table. She killed my son for money, and he was her accomplice. Nora placed a printed document on the table, a copy of the bank transaction. The bold black line was as damning as a blood stain on paper. Payment to Cole Enterprises, $200,000. Eleanor, if we hand this to the police, Melissa will know you're working with them. She's dangerous. I think you should stay at my place for a few days. Eleanor shook her head. No, I'm not going anywhere. I have to protect my granddaughter. If Melissa finds out, she might do something reckless to the child. That afternoon, Melissa called. Her voice was unusually soft. Mother Sophie misses you so much. Let me bring her over for dinner tonight, okay? Eleanor hesitated. Her tone was gentle as mist, but beneath it was something controlled and calculating. All right, she said slowly. I'll make Daniel's favorite honey-roasted chicken. When she hung up, Nora looked worried. Are you sure about this? Eleanor nodded. I need to see her. I need to know how she reacts when she realizes I'm not the naive old woman she thinks I am. That evening, the rain still hadn't stopped. Melissa arrived with a box of pastries and her perfect smile. Sophie ran into the house, throwing her arms around her grandmother. Grandma, I told Mommy about my drawing yesterday. She said I'm really good at it. Eleanor smiled faintly, brushing the child's hair. Yes, sweetheart, it was very real. Melissa froze for a moment, a flicker of unease in her eyes, before she quickly composed herself. Kids, you know they have wild imaginations, she said sweetly. You shouldn't take what they say too seriously. Dinner passed under a suffocating silence. The clinking of knives against plates filled the room, broken by long, tense pauses. Melissa barely ate, her eyes darting around as if searching for something. Finally, she spoke. Mother, I heard you've been seeing Detective Hale again. Eleanor looked up calmly. Yes, he stopped by. I think he's still haunted by Daniel's case. Honestly, I think we should just let it rest. We need to move on. You're right, Eleanor replied evenly, her tone as smooth as still water. But sometimes to move on, you have to know exactly what killed you. Melissa gripped her glass, a flash of cold fury crossing her face. What are you implying? Nothing. Eleanor smiled. Just the ramblings of an old woman. After they left, Nora emerged from the kitchen. She had been there the whole time observing. You saw it, didn't you? She's scared but still confident, the kind of person who only panics when she's cornered. Eleanor stared out the window where Melissa's car lights faded into the rain, and I'll be the one to corner her. Just then, the phone buzzed. A text from Hale appeared, update. The clinic where Melissa works received a complaint about missing sedatives. The timing matches the day Daniel died. Eleanor read the words, her lips tightening. Sedatives, Nora frowned. You think she drugged Daniel, then pushed him when he couldn't fight back? Eleanor sat down and wrote in her notebook, Melissa drugs Harrison Insurance. The shaky handwriting was filled with purpose. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The dark surface of the lake reflected the glow of the house lights, flickering like a small flame. Eleanor closed her notebook and whispered to herself, Tomorrow we won't be chasing shadows anymore. Tomorrow the shadows will have to face the light. The next morning the sky was strikingly clear, as if the storm from the night before had washed away every trace of darkness. But inside Eleanor's heart the clouds still lingered. She put on her gray wool coat and stepped out of the house with a small notebook in her hand, the one containing everything she and Detective Hale had pieced together. Today she was meeting him to plan their next move. The cafe by the lake where they agreed to meet was quiet, filled with the warm scent of freshly baked waffles. Ian Hale was already there, seated in a corner with a thick folder before him. He motioned for her to sit and spoke in a low but firm voice. I've confirmed it. Melissa didn't just transfer money to Harrison Cole. She also opened an anonymous bank account and has been transferring $50,000 a month into it, probably to hide a middleman. Eleanor stared at the stack of papers. So she wasn't acting alone. Exactly. And here's the real concern. Cole's company is under investigation for bribery. He might have used that money to manipulate the accident report. Hale opened a photograph from the file, a forensic image from the crime scene. At the bottom of the stairs lay Daniel's body, his right wrist swollen and red. Hale pointed to a faint mark near the top of the stairs. Here, a woman's shoe print, small size. It wasn't mentioned in the report, but I enlarged the photo. It could belong to Melissa. Eleanor felt her chest tighten. They overlooked it because her tears were prettier than the truth. Hale glanced at her admiration flickering in his eyes. "I have to warn you, what's coming won't be easy. If we expose this too soon, she'll have time to destroy the evidence. Then we need a surprise strike," Eleanor said coldly, "and I know how to do it." That afternoon, she went to her daughter-in-law's house. Melissa opened the door, surprise flashing across her face. "Mother, you came without calling first. Does a grandmother need to make an appointment?" "I just wanted to see Sophie." Melissa smiled faintly. "She's napping." "Why don't you come in for some tea?" Eleanor stepped inside, her eyes sweeping the immaculate room. Everything was spotless, so perfect it felt staged. On the shelf sat a new framed photo, Melissa and Sophie beside a luxury car, a car Daniel could never have afforded. They sat across from each other in the gleaming kitchen. Melissa poured tea, her voice sweet and polished. Eleanor took a small sip, then said softly, "I went to the cemetery yesterday. I placed flowers on Daniel's grave." "Did you?" "Yes. But the strange thing is, someone else had been there. A man left white roses with a note that said, 'I'm sorry.'" Melissa's eyes flickered. Maybe an old friend of Daniel's. Maybe Eleanor replied, never looking away. "But it's strange, I've seen that signature before. On the insurance documents." The air in the room thickened. Melissa set her teacup down with a sharp click. "What are you implying? Nothing at all. I just wanted to ask, do you ever feel guilty?" "Guilty for what?" "For what you've done." Their eyes locked the silence between them, heavy as lead. Melissa forced a nervous smile. "You're tired, Mother. You should rest." Eleanor rose and stepped closer. "You think I don't know? Daniel told me before he died. People don't fall because of stairs. They fall because they trusted the wrong person." Melissa took a step back, her lips trembling though she tried to remain composed. "You have no proof." "Oh, you're wrong," Eleanor said, staring straight into her eyes. "I have more than proof. I just haven't used it yet because I wanted to see the face of someone who knows she's about to lose everything." She turned and walked out, leaving Melissa frozen in the silent kitchen. Outside, the wind from the lake howled, biting and cold. When Eleanor got home, the phone rang. Hale's voice came through urgent. "What did you do with Melissa today? She just called her lawyer. I think she's starting to panic. She might make a move tonight." Eleanor narrowed her eyes, gazing at the dark water beyond the window. "Good," she said quietly. "When the hunter starts to run, that's how you know it's afraid." She drew the curtain shut, the lamp casting a warm glow across her aged but sharp face. 3 years of waiting, and finally the truth was trembling under the light. And that night, Eleanor knew the real battle had just begun. That night, the wind rose fiercely, bending the pine trees along the lake. Eleanor couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, the yellow light casting over her thick notebook, every clue, every date, every line of the timeline. Outside, the waves hit the shore with a steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of something alive waiting to erupt. Around midnight, the phone rang. Hale's voice was hoarse with exhaustion. "Eleanor, we've found something new. Harrison Cole was once sued by a woman named Lydia Cooper, a former nurse at Melissa's clinic. She disappeared after withdrawing the case. It's possible Lydia knew something." Eleanor froze. Lydia Cooper. She remembered that name. Daniel had mentioned her once, saying Melissa had a close colleague who often came over. "How long has she been missing?" 3 years, Hale replied. Almost the exact time Daniel died. The case was dropped due to lack of evidence. The air in the room turned icy. "Do you think Melissa was involved?" she asked quietly. "It's hard to say," Hale said, "but I'll find Lydia's file. This could be the missing link." She hung up and walked to the cabinet of family photos. Among the frames was one from Daniel's last birthday. Melissa was smiling, and beside her stood a young woman with brown hair and sad eyes. Lydia. The picture now looked like a warning the deaths around Melissa were never coincidences. The next morning, Eleanor drove to the hospital where her son had worked. She lied, saying she wanted to make a charitable donation to get a meeting with the manager. The young man didn't suspect a thing and showed her some old photos of the medical team. In the second row, Lydia's face was there, smiling, wearing her name badge. Beside her was Melissa, her hand resting lightly on her friend's shoulder. The smile was friendly, but in Melissa's eyes, even then, there was something else, something possessive. As Eleanor left the hospital, her phone buzzed with a message from Hale. Found the old case file. Lydia's body was discovered a year later in an abandoned lot. Police ruled it an unidentified traffic accident, but the time of death matches the week Daniel died. Eleanor stopped the car on the roadside, the ground beneath her feet suddenly feeling unsteady. She killed Lydia to silence her, she whispered. That evening, Nora came by, bringing a bag of pastries and new information. Hale told me Melissa withdrew a large amount of cash over the past 2 days. It looks like she's preparing to leave town. Eleanor nodded slowly. She knows we're getting close. What do we do now? Nora asked. Bring Sophie here tonight. If Melissa's planning to run, she'll want to take the girl with her. I won't let that happen. Around 7, Nora drove to the preschool pretending to pick Sophie up on Melissa's behalf. By the time they got back to Eleanor's house, dusk had settled. Sophie was cheerful, hugging her teddy bear tightly. Grandma, why didn't Mommy come to get me? Eleanor stroked her hair softly. You're staying with Grandma tonight, sweetheart. Mommy has work to do. Near 9 o'clock, the phone rang. The name on the screen was Melissa. Eleanor answered. Mother Melissa's voice trembled unlike ever before. Sophie's with you, isn't she? Yes, Eleanor said evenly. She's asleep. I need to see you, right now. It's late. Please, Mother, I just want to talk. Nora shook her head in warning, silently urging her not to go. But Eleanor knew this was the moment she'd been waiting for. Fine. Meet me at the dock behind the house, the place where Daniel used to fish. 15 minutes later, an engine roared in the night. Headlights cut across the black surface of the lake. Melissa stepped out thin, wrapped in a dark coat, her eyes hollow with fatigue. Mother. I don't know who's been filling your head, but everything you think is wrong. Daniel, he slipped, I swear. Eleanor moved closer, the warm light from the boathouse glinting across her face, calm and cold. Swear. Like you swore to love him and keep him safe. You don't understand. Melissa's voice cracked, breaking into sobs. It was an accident. I just pushed him a little. I didn't think he would. The sentence died in the air. Eleanor felt her whole body go numb. Thank you, my dear, she whispered, for confirming what I needed to hear. Behind them, footsteps broke through the sound of wind. Hale and 2 officers emerged from the shadows. He held up his phone, his tone firm. We've heard enough, Melissa Cole. You're under arrest for the suspected murders of your husband and your colleague. Melissa froze, her face drained of color. Mother, you set me up? Eleanor answered slowly, tears sliding down her cheeks. No, Melissa. You set yourself up the moment you believed love was something you could trade for money. The wind from the lake surged, whipping Eleanor's silver hair into the air. As Melissa was handcuffed, Eleanor turned away, her eyes fixed on the shimmering water, reflecting the flashing lights. She knew the fight wasn't over, but tonight, for the first time in 3 years, she had heard the truth with her own ears. The next morning, pale sunlight filtered through fogged windows. Eleanor's house was filled with the scent of cinnamon tea and quiet peace. Nora sat in the armchair reading the morning paper. The bold headline stretched across the front page, "Local nurse arrested for suspected murder of husband and missing colleague." Beneath it was a photo of Melissa in handcuffs, her head bowed low, camera flashes glinting off her pale face. Eleanor stood by the window looking out at the still surface of the lake. A soft breeze rippled across the water. She still couldn't believe that the nightmare that had haunted her for 3 long years had finally shattered. Everything happened so fast, Nora said, folding the paper. "Hale told me they're questioning Harrison Cole. He admitted to the money transfers, but said Melissa was the one who planned everything. Looks like she really was the mastermind." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I know. I saw it in her eyes last night, the look of someone who has always been in control, but now she no longer holds any power." Nora sighed. "All she has left is Sophie. I just worry the media will come turn it into a circus." Eleanor placed a hand on her chest. "I won't let anyone touch her. Sophie's suffered enough." A knock sounded at the door. Hale entered carrying a folder. His expression was grave as he looked at the 2 women. "We have results from the forensic lab. Daniel's fall could not have been an accident. There were pressure marks on his wrist and the sedative found in his blood matches, the exact type that went missing from the clinic." He paused, his tone softening. "And Lydia Cooper. She didn't die in an accident. The injuries on her neck were identical to Daniel's." Eleanor closed her eyes, tears silently spilling down her cheeks. "She killed Lydia too." "Yes," Hale said quietly. "We also discovered Melissa used Lydia's identity to forge Sophie's birth records. The girl is actually Lydia's biological daughter." The room fell silent. Nora squeezed Eleanor's trembling hand. "Oh my God," Eleanor whispered, her voice breaking. "So Daniel was raising the daughter of the woman his wife murdered, and he still loved that child as his own." Hale nodded, his gaze soft. "Now justice will be served. But as for Sophie, we need you to take custody for now. You're her only family." Eleanor smiled faintly through her tears. "It won't be temporary. I'll be her home always." That afternoon, she went to the social center to pick Sophie up. The little girl sat quietly on a chair, hugging her teddy bear, her face tired and confused. When she saw Eleanor, she leapt into her arms. Grandma Eleanor hugged her tightly, feeling every ounce of pain melt away in that small embrace. "I'm here now, my love," she whispered. "No one will ever make you afraid again." On the way home, the sunset painted the lake in shades of golden honey. Sophie dozed off in the back seat, her head resting against her teddy bear. Through the rearview mirror, Eleanor looked at her small, peaceful face, so innocent, so pure. She knew her journey wasn't over yet. There would still be a trial, still memories that needed cleansing, but at least the child was safe. She smiled softly and whispered to herself, "Daniel, you can rest now. I've brought the truth back into the light." 3 weeks later, Melissa's first trial began. The Vermont County Courthouse was packed to capacity. Reporters, locals, and faces that had only known the story through gossip now crowded the hallways. They all wanted to see with their own eyes the woman who had once drawn the town's sympathy, now accused of being a cold-blooded killer. Eleanor sat in the front row, her hands gripping her old wool scarf. Hale sat beside her, giving her a small nod of reassurance. Up front, Melissa was escorted in, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit. Her hair pulled back, her pale face bare of makeup, yet her eyes still sharp. When she saw Eleanor, her lips tightened, as if she wanted to speak, but she turned away instead. The prosecutor began presenting the case. He showed the audio recording where Melissa spoke about the push the video found on the USB drive, the bank records, and the sedative traces found in Daniel's blood. Each piece of evidence projected on the screen seemed to weigh heavier on the room. When the recording played, Melissa's cold, steady voice filled the air. He trusts me. Just one push and it's all over." The courtroom fell silent. Eleanor clenched her hands, her nails digging into her palms. She could feel her chest trembling, but her gaze never left her daughter-in-law. For a brief moment, Melissa turned to look at her. Between them, there was no longer the distance of a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, only two souls standing on opposite sides, one for truth, one for deceit. When it was the defense attorney's turn, he tried to plead for compassion. "My client suffered severe psychological trauma after her husband's death. She doesn't clearly remember what happened. Daniel's death was a tragic accident in a moment of anger, not premeditated murder." The prosecutor immediately countered, "A push in anger doesn't come with sedatives in the victim's blood or a plan to collect insurance money. No one calls that an accident." The trial stretched on for days. Each morning the headlines screamed, "The Brooks case, a tale of betrayal between love and greed." The town was divided, but most were stunned by Melissa's chilling composure. On the fifth day, Harrison Cole took the stand. He looked gaunt, his face hollow. Under the courtroom lights, he lowered his head, his voice trembling. "I met Melissa at the clinic. She said her husband was controlling, that he suffocated her. She said she wanted freedom, wanted money to start over. She asked me to help her arrange an accident. I was foolish enough to believe her. Afterward, she paid me $200,000 to keep quiet. But when Lydia disappeared, I realized I was working with the devil." The courtroom gasped. Melissa jumped to her feet, shouting, "He's lying! He forced me!" The officers immediately restrained her as the judge struck the gavel demanding order. Eleanor sat still. She felt no victory, only emptiness. She thought of Daniel, his gentle smile, the way he used to hold little Sophie in his arms. Now he lived only in photographs and fading memories. Hale leaned closer and whispered, "We have one last piece of evidence." From the hard drive in her safe, a video Melissa recorded herself. The screen flickered to life. Melissa appeared neatly dressed, looking straight into the camera. Her voice was calm, almost chilling. "If you're watching this, it means I failed. But I don't regret it. I only took what I deserved. Daniel was weak. Lydia was a fool. They didn't deserve to live." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, and the sound of shocked breaths filled the air. The judge had to pause the session to restore order. Eleanor closed her eyes, a single tear tracing down her cheek. She wasn't crying for the murderer, but for the humanity that had died inside her daughter-in-law long ago. 2 days later, the jury returned its verdict. Defendant Melissa Brooks is found guilty of first-degree murder insurance fraud and falsification of documents, sentenced life imprisonment without parole. Melissa stood motionless, her eyes hollow. As she was led away, she turned back to look at Eleanor one final time. There was no hatred left in her gaze, only exhaustion and the realization that the power she once held was gone forever. After the trial, Eleanor stepped outside. A light drizzle fell and the gray sky blurred like a watercolor painting. Reporters surrounded her, but she spoke only one sentence. "Justice can't bring back the ones I love, but at least it forces evil to face the light." That evening, when she returned home, Sophie ran to her and wrapped her arms around her waist. "Grandma." "Where's Mommy?" Eleanor knelt down and held her tight. "Mommy has to go away for a long time, sweetheart, but Grandma will always be here." Sophie pressed her face into Eleanor's shoulder and whispered softly, "I'm not scared, I have you." Eleanor held her close, feeling the small warmth seep into her heart. She looked out the window where the lake lay calm and glassy. Inside, her pain slowly gave way to peace. Daniel was finally at rest, and the innocent child in her arms that was her reason to keep going, to remind the world that no darkness can ever hide the light of truth. A month after the trial, Vermont had returned to its quiet peace as if nothing had ever happened. The first snow of winter blanketed the rooftops, and Lake St. Clair was covered by a thin layer of ice that shimmered under the pale moonlight. But inside Eleanor's small house, the lights stayed on every night. She couldn't sleep often, waking in the middle of the night and looking toward the next room where Sophie slept soundly, her little hands clutching her teddy bear as if afraid someone might take it away. Eleanor moved softly to the kitchen and made herself a cup of hot cocoa. The scent of milk and cinnamon filled the air, bringing back memories of when Daniel was alive. He used to come home late, exhausted, but always smiled when he saw his mother waiting with 2 identical cups of cocoa. "Mom, only you know how to make something that keeps me awake and still at peace," he once said. She smiled faintly, placing the cup by the window. Outside, snow fell gently, covering the old trellis in white. That night, Eleanor dreamed. In her dream, Daniel walked up from the frozen lake, the moonlight glinting on his face. He smiled, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said softly, "Mom, don't let the past chain you anymore. Live for Sophie." When she woke, her pillow was wet with tears. The next morning, Hale came by. He had retired from the force, but still kept in touch. "I wanted to bring you this," he said, placing a sealed envelope on the table. The police found more files on Melissa's hard drive. It turns out she didn't just kill Daniel and Lydia. Eleanor opened the envelope. Inside was the forensic report. 3 elderly patients from a nursing home where Melissa once worked had died from sedative poisoning. Each had left donations to the hospital, but the money had disappeared. She was a serial killer, Eleanor said quietly, her voice cold as ice. Hale nodded. "Justice may be slow, but it's never blind. Because of you, we can finally see the whole truth." "No," she replied softly, "because of Daniel. My son never truly left." That afternoon, after Hale had gone, Eleanor noticed Sophie sitting by the fireplace coloring with her box of crayons. The little girl was drawing 2 figures standing beneath falling snow, one tall, one small, with a bright house glowing behind them. "Grandma, that's you and me." Sophie said, her eyes sparkling, "You're smiling and I'm holding your hand. Where's my mommy?" Eleanor bent down, brushing her granddaughter's hair gently. "Your mommy is somewhere very far away, a place where people have to learn how to be good again. But I believe one day she'll understand that love can't be bought with lies." Sophie nodded, her voice soft as a candle flame. "When Mommy understands, will you forgive her?" The question tightened Eleanor's chest. She looked into the child's eyes and saw in them a light the world had long forgotten. "I will forgive her," she whispered, "because if I don't, my heart will remain locked in the same prison as hers." That evening, Nora came over with a warm apple pie. They sat together, listening to the wind whistling outside the porch. "You know, Nora said the whole town talks about you. They call you the bravest woman in Vermont." Eleanor chuckled softly, her voice calm and low. "I'm not brave. I'm just a mother who refused to forget her son." Nora looked around the cozy room. "And now you're also the grandmother of a very special little girl. Sophie needs you more than ever." When Nora left, Eleanor stood by the door watching her go, then turned off the lights one by one until only the soft glow remained on Daniel's framed photo in the center of the table. She sat down and wrote in her journal, "In the past 3 years, I have walked from darkness into light. I lost a son but was given a small soul to love again. Justice does not restore the past, but it opens the door to the future." Outside, snow fell softly. In the room, Sophie kept drawing, adding more stars to her unfinished picture. Eleanor joined her, helping the child tape it to the wall. "Isn't it beautiful, Grandma?" "It's beautiful, my love." "So, Grandma," Sophie whispered, We don't have to be afraid of the night anymore, right? Eleanor smiled and pulled her close. No, my darling, because now we have our own light. Later that night, she opened the window and looked up at the sky ablaze with stars. Somewhere in the stillness, she thought she heard Daniel's voice carried by the wind. Thank you, Mom. She closed her eyes and smiled. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt truly at peace, and she knew that their lives, hers, her son's, and her granddaughter's, had finally stepped out of the shadows to begin a new chapter, brighter, kinder, and filled with the light that still burned gently within the heart of a mother. The following spring, the first daffodils bloomed around the porch, golden and bright like a new promise. Sophie had turned another year older, her cheeks rosy, her little voice chattering through the house. Eleanor hung white curtains and repainted the window frames, trying to give the home an air of peace. But in her heart, something still hadn't settled. That morning, as she walked Sophie to school, she saw a few people gathered outside the gate, holding cameras. The press still refused to let the old story die. A young reporter hurried toward her, speaking quickly. Mrs. Brooks, there are rumors that Melissa has sent you a letter from prison. Can you confirm that Eleanor stopped? I have nothing to say. The woman pressed on. They say in the letter she asked to see you. Will you go? Eleanor tightened her grip on her purse strap. When someone chooses lies over truth, apologies lose their meaning. Then she turned away, taking Sophie's hand and walking through the school gates, leaving the flashing cameras behind. That afternoon, Nora came by. She placed an envelope on the table. I know you don't want to talk about it, but here it is. It really came. A letter from prison. Eleanor looked at the envelope, her heart sinking. Melissa's handwriting was still the same, neat, rounded, careful, and insincere. Slowly, she opened it. Eleanor, I know you hate me. You have every right to. But I want you to understand I never meant to kill Daniel. I only wanted to scare him to make him sign the papers to transfer the money. Harrison pushed me to go further. Everything spiraled out of control. Now every night I hear Daniel calling my name. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only want you to tell Sophie that her mother loved her truly, loved her. Melissa. Eleanor folded the letter, her hands cold as ice. Nora sat across from her, silent, waiting. What will you do? She finally asked. Eleanor looked toward the window where the afternoon sunlight spread gold across the steps. I won't reply. Forgiveness isn't about words. It's about how you choose to live. The child doesn't need to know what her mother was. She only needs to know that love is real. On the weekend, Eleanor took Sophie to visit Daniel's grave. The grass was green and soft, the daffodils blooming thick around it. Sophie placed a small stone on the headstone with the word Dad written on it in marker. Grandma, is Daddy here? Yes, my love. He's here in the wind, in the sunshine, and in your heart. Sophie smiled and looked up at the clear sky. I dreamed Daddy was smiling at me. He said I should be good so you'd be happy. Eleanor brushed the child's hair, tears shining in her eyes. Your daddy's right. Later that evening, when they returned home, Nora was waiting with a bouquet of flowers. From Hale, she said. He's been transferred to the city. Before leaving, he told me, justice is a beginning, not an end. Eleanor smiled softly. He's right. We don't live to seek revenge, but to prove that kindness can heal even the deepest wounds. That night, the spring breeze stirred the curtains gently. Sophie slept soundly, clutching her old teddy bear. Eleanor sat at her desk, writing the final lines in her journal. I have seen the face of darkness, but I have also seen the light in a child's eyes. Life is not just for repaying the past, but for passing on hope. If anyone ever reads these words, Remember, this truth never dies and love never runs dry. She closed the journal, turned off the lamp, and left only a small candle burning on the table where Daniel's photo stood between two vases of flowers. The flame flickered softly, reflecting his smile in the photograph. Eleanor whispered, "Rest well, Daniel. The little one and I will go on because of you." Outside, the wind rose, rustling the trees, but inside the small house by the lake, peace had finally returned. The darkness had lifted at last, leaving only the quiet laughter of a child and the gentle warmth of a mother and grandmother, a woman who had walked through loss to rediscover the meaning of love. 10 years had passed, and the small house by Lake St. Clair still stood quietly beneath the blue sky, its roof weathered by time, yet its windows glowing with warm light each night. Eleanor was now nearly 80, her steps slower, her hair completely white, but her eyes still shone with the gentle strength of a woman who had endured every storm. Beside her was Sophie, now 18, tall and graceful, her bright eyes a mirror of Daniel's. She had just received her acceptance letter to medical school, the dream her father once cherished. That morning, the kitchen was filled with the sweet scent of apple pie. Sophie placed a small white-wrapped box on the table. "Grandma, this is a gift I made for you," she said with excitement. Eleanor smiled warmly. "Another gift, my dear? I'm running out of space for them. This one's special," Sophie said, her voice glowing with pride. Eleanor opened the box. Inside was a new album with a brown leather cover. Each page held a blend of old and new photos. Daniel holding Sophie as a baby, the two of them laughing under the trees, moments of simple, ordinary days. On the last page, Sophie had written in her own handwriting, "For the one who taught me that love is stronger than the past." Eleanor sat still, her eyes misting over. "My dear, this is the most beautiful gift I've ever received." Sophie moved closer and said softly, "Grandma, I know everything now. I read your journal. I know who my mother is." Eleanor froze. "You shouldn't have." "It's all right," Grandma Sophie interrupted gently. "I'm not angry. I just feel sorry for her. I think she must have suffered too." Eleanor looked at her granddaughter and saw in her eyes a calmness she had spent her whole life searching for. "You don't hate her?" she asked. Sophie shook her head slowly. "No, because if you could forgive, then so can I. You and Dad both taught me that hatred only pulls us back into the darkness." They sat in silence for a long moment. The spring wind drifted through the porch, carrying the scent of fresh grass and the gentle rippling of the lake. Eleanor spoke quietly. "When you were born, I thought my life would only ever be filled with loss. But you proved me wrong. You are the best part of what the past has left behind." Sophie smiled, squeezing her grandmother's hand. "And you're the reason I believe in kindness." That afternoon, they walked along the lakeshore. Golden daffodils bloomed in clusters, the light breeze rippling across the water. Sophie asked softly, "Do you still think about my mother?" "Of course," Eleanor replied. "But I'm no longer angry. Maybe somewhere your mother is learning how to love again. What matters is that you're here, good, strong, and untouched by her darkness." As the sun set, they returned home. In the kitchen, the firelight glowed across Daniel's photo on the wall. Sophie opened the new album and placed it beside the old photograph. "I think Dad would love this," she whispered. Eleanor nodded gently. "Your father would be proud just as I am now." Night fell. Sophie slept soundly in the next room while Eleanor sat by the window, the cool air stirring the thin curtains. She looked up at the sky full of stars and whispered, "Daniel, do you see her? She's grown up strong and kind. She's the light you left behind." Turning back to the table, she looked at the two albums lying side by side, one old, one new. One had hidden guilt, the other preserved love. Between them lay the journey of a mother who had turned loss into peace. Eleanor closed the window and whispered, "If anyone hears this story, let them believe that truth and compassion will always find each other, because no darkness can ever hide the light of love." And so in the small house by the lake, the story came to an end, not with tears, but with the gentle warmth of a new dawn, where the past had finally found rest and the future began.